Today we do an interview with Klaus Iglberger. Hi, Klaus. Nice to see you. What are you up with C++ right now?
So, hi, Jens. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for the invitation to this interview. So, right now I'm doing training classes. This is what I've been doing professionally since 3-4 years now, and there is still a lot of training classes scheduled for this year. So I'm kind of lucky that I have a lot of customers that are interested in training classes. So that's pretty much what I'm doing right now. But I'm looking forward to the 10th anniversary edition of Meeting C++ at the Andels Hotel. Yeah,
that is true. We are this year going to be 10 years in Berlin, and I'm looking very much forward. It's like in 2 weeks. It's already like today, like the second day we're gonna be on. Just in 2 weeks right now, Hana's keynote will be running. Or starting to be exact. I'm looking forward to that. Anyways, you mentioned the conference, then let's directly go into one of your talks. You're talking about design patterns and the most common misconceptions. This is one of your talks. The other one we'll go later into, but so what can one expect to hear from you when attendees join this talk?
So some may remember that last year I've given the first edition of this talk, so the 1 of N. Last year I focused a little bit on terminology, common things that where the terms are used pretty much arbitrarily. So I talked about bridges, factories, or factory method in particular, and builders. This year I want to continue the story. And one of the highlights, most important topics from my point of view is the discussion about CRTP. So indeed, this 1995 curiously recurring template pattern. In the last 1.5 years, I would say, I've seen 3 talks by other people, very experienced, good speakers, who talked about CRTP, talked about how to modernize it, mostly with explicit object parameters. And interestingly, I realized that in all of these talks, the examples would not compile. That made me kind of curious, and I realized that nobody really understood that there are 2 different kinds of CRTP. Really 2 different applications that work very differently and are used for different purposes. And so that's what I want to address. Now, why are there 2 different CRTPs? And why is there a miscommunication? If somebody says CRTP in a talk, somebody else might think about, well, the other form, and might be a little confused that things do not work as expected. So that's definitely something I want to highlight. But then, of course, I also want to show how to modernize this. At least the one form that can be modernized with explicit object parameters. And so you already see there's a couple of other things as well. But I will start with CRTP because this is the one thing that hopefully I can clarify, and that nobody talks about this in the wrong form anymore. There's a little more. I will probably also, no, not just probably, I will also address visitor, adapter, and chain of responsibility. Time might be a little tense or dense. I'm not sure if it really fits into that one talk. But that's a good thing about having naming this 2 of N. If something doesn't really fit, I can still push it to 3 of N. Then I have something for next year already.
Yeah, I think it will be a while until you have covered all design patterns in a talk.
Absolutely. This is a good.
We're looking forward to the continuation.
Yeah. But it's a topic that really is important to me. Sorry.
I've noticed that with GCC 14, deducing this is supported. So is like the compilation issue more like a compiler support issue, or is it like that people have been showing pseudocode on this?
It's the second. So some people may remember that a couple of years ago, I think it was in 2018, Ben Dean gave a talk about deducing this. explicit object parameters,
Mhm.
which actually it was a great talk. But in this talk, he showed that CRTP can be replaced, CRTP in quotes, with explicit object parameters. And he made the comment that this pretty much replaces CRTP. Based on this comment, then people have introduced examples in their codes where CRTP was replaced with explicit object parameters. But what they showed was a different example, which would not compile. And so it really was just an issue of the two different forms of CRTP. So the first form being an application of mixins, essentially, where you add some functionality by means of a base class. And in order to do this for the right types, you use CRTP. But the second form being a form where you then actually use the base class as an abstraction, where you pass this the thing via base class, and then via the base class go to the drive class and do some stuff. And the second is exactly the form that explicit object parameters cannot cover. And unfortunately, many people then showed examples with this, probably just slideware, never really tested this, and this caused a little bit of confusion. That's what I just wanted to
point. I mean, yes, you also can use CRTP to basically derive from an interface or to enable an interface on a type, and that is of course a completely different use case.
Exactly.
That's very interesting.
And that's the two different forms. And so one of the things I will try to do is to establish different names. Try to just say CRTP is more like the implementation detail, but we want to approach two different things. And I think, again, a couple of years ago, may also have been 2018, Jonathan Beccara used static interfaces. That's what I was going to propose for the one form, and mixin is pretty much the other application. And perhaps this helps a little bit to distinguish the two forms and to primarily talk about what I want to achieve and not how I want to achieve that. That might help.
Interesting. Let's go to your second talk where you're trying to convince us that there are no silver bullets.
Indeed. So I prepared this as a keynote talk for C++ on C this year. And I think this was one of my best talks. So definitely one of the talks that I enjoyed the most. Again, it's about design, software design, and it's about some statements that I've also picked up in the last couple of years, where people were absolutely convinced that we do not need virtual functions anymore. Indeed, there have been talks about this, that we can replace virtual functions pretty much by things like variant. So variant templates, this is all we need. We don't need virtual functions anymore. And this was not just surprising to me, but a little terrifying, because this kind of shows that people don't really analyze the design behavior or the architectural properties of such a solution. A standard variant has, well, it's a wonderful solution. Don't get me wrong. It's absolutely amazing for the right use case. But you cannot replace virtual functions because pretty much the design properties are the opposite. And that's what I want to show in this talk, that you cannot just take one solution and use it for all problems, that you really have to consider the design properties. What does a particular solution do? What can you extend easily? What can you not extend easily or change easily? And based on that, you should choose your solution. You should not just use this golden hammer or silver bullet for every possible problem. That would not work. Yeah.
I find this very interesting. I had no idea that basically you also submit the keynote to my conference. Because I've been noticing that two other speakers have had done that, and it's great to see that at least one of them, has done very well in the voting. And I think it's a very interesting topic to talk about, and especially virtual functions still have like a place.
Absolutely. And while I do agree totally with statements like they take a little time, there is overhead, absolutely, still there is a design advantage. And that's what we should always consider in our design approaches. So to me, this is a pretty important topic indeed. This is why the entire talk is pretty much just on this one topic. But if somebody sees the talk afterwards, he or she should have a very, very good idea why virtual functions are still relevant, perhaps a little bit also what we can do to replace them. There's a couple of ideas, but it's not variant, definitely not. And of course, people that see the talk will also then understand when to use a variant and when not to use a variant. I admit to some extent it's also from a book, which is something that is visible here on the slide as well.
Yes.
This is something I've addressed in the book as well. But I think this talk goes much more into that particular detail. Makes it hopefully so much clearer that really there is a completely different, that there are completely different directions that we can choose in the design. Yeah. So as I said, it's definitely one of my favorite talks, and I definitely enjoyed to have the chance to talk about this one more time.
Yeah, it's definitely a talk we should look forward to, and it's in the main track. So you mentioned your book.
Yes.
We're probably all waiting for the second version.
So I am already working on that, but not in the sense that I can already give some date. No, it's going to take it some time. The first book had the definitive advantage that I already had all the material. I'd already given several training classes on this topic. I pretty much just had to write the chapters. For the second book, I'm really preparing new material, and therefore it takes a little longer. But I'm definitely thinking out this, and next year I might have a little time again to truly finish this. Let's see.
Yeah, I think it's a good approach to take your time and not make false promises.
Definitely. It's not like John Lakers who announced the books and then later said that one book is scheduled for 26 and the other for 29. No, that is a little too long.
Yeah. All right. You mentioned your trainings classes. I'd be really interested to know what is it what people want to learn?
So most training classes and also most talks at conferences focus on features, focus on how to implement things. This is not design. Design truly is the bigger picture. The question, how do I properly reduce dependencies? How do I manage dependencies between my little pieces in the software? And there are very few talks about this, unfortunately. There are very few training classes. And this is what I try to, what my training class tries to fill. I see this a little bit as a gap. So in this training class, people will learn why this is actually important, why this is even more important than knowing about every feature in the language, knowing about all the options that I have from an implementation point of view. We'll talk about design patterns. But of course, not just the classic versions, not just the Gang of 4 versions, but we'll definitely see how C++ has changed, how the patterns are implemented today. And I believe this is definitely a pretty amazing impression. You see that you have so many more options, and the new options are so much better in most cases. But then most importantly, we'll also really see all the different choices. Before I mentioned the different design alternatives, the design directions. That's definitely something I will highlight as well, so that people later have these tools and can map them to the according problem. When they want to separate these concerns in a certain way, then they will know this is the pattern to use, or the combination of patterns sometimes. This is what we do. And one of the things that is super important to me is we'll definitely also do hands-on. It's not just theory. It's not just talking about the stuff. People will be able to try this on their own and see the advantages live. And that's, I believe, one of the most interesting things. So now to advertise it, remind me if I'm wrong, but I think we have scheduled something for February next year.
Yes.
And another training class for meeting C++ or in this context. I believe this will be a pretty amazing training class. 3 days just on this topic. And so far, I've only had very good feedback about all the training classes I've given about this.
Yeah, it's true actually. I mean, C++ will offer your training about design patterns next year, in the last week of February.
So people who have read the book might now argue, well, I know this stuff. Well, true. I will definitely cover a lot of stuff from the book, but hands-on. And I believe this definitely makes a difference. And we'll also talk about a couple of things that I did not cover in the book. Not because I didn't want to, but because there was just not enough room or space anymore. I had agreed on
that not everyone has the time to watch the videos or read the books, and the training often then to bring up the team to
exactly.
Some folks to
but I believe,
knowledge.
But I believe even if you have read the book or watched any of my talks, even then the training class might actually be beneficial. But if you've not read the book, then of course it's super beneficial because, as I said, there is too little information on that topic and too little awareness in the community.
Yeah, I think that's true. So how much, I mean, safety is coming up a lot now, but I wonder like how much is that visible to you as a trainer? Is that like something which has been requested?
Not specifically as a safety security training. I'm not a security expert. I'm more the person who thinks about safety because I do a lot of training classes for the automotive industry. But one of the things that I generally talk about in training classes, whatever topic it is to keep the things simple. Simple, understandable, maintainable. And that alone makes a big positive difference in terms of safety. As soon as you know what you're doing, as soon as you understand the code, hopefully fully understand it, things are way easier. And so it's definitely also safer. Since I'm not a safety expert, not really, I've not been, nobody has approached me about a safety training, but I have something about safety in my portfolio as well. So as soon as somebody is interested in safety, I'm doing something like this. Yeah, absolutely. It's an important topic. And I'm actually convinced that C++ is pretty safe if you use today's C++. And this is the the problem that I see everywhere. If people use yesterday's C++, of course, there's problems. Yeah, it's too low level. It's too many implementation details. But today's C++ on the higher level, there's barely any opportunity to do many of these safety problems anymore.
I do agree with that, but we lack the certification. I think it's one of the advantages of an environment like Misra, where you have a checker, and that basically enables you to produce proof of your safety. And Rust guarantees it with a language, and C++ has a problem that basically, today's written C++ is safe, but everyone knows that we have like a lot of historical code and C basis, which we have to include because that's the only library on the market doing X, and we have to have that feature. So
I believe that is indeed the problem. It's not the new code. It's not the knowledge about the new things. It's the old things. But also the people, of course, that still work in this old way. We, and when I say we, I mean the people that go to the conferences, the people that watch the talks, read the books. This is the 10% of the community, I would guess. I'd call this the 10% bubble. And it might actually be smaller. 10% might already be pretty optimistic. I believe that 90% of people don't care, don't want to go to new things because they have done things they have worked in the same way for decades potentially. That, I believe, is the real issue. I don't know how to solve that, but I don't think it's the language. My personal issue is, I believe it's more the programmers. And yes, I'm once again, I do not believe it's the people that now, for instance, listen to this interview, the people that go to the conference,
Yeah.
because this is the people that care. It's the other people. By the way, I'm pretty much pretty certain that Rust has exactly the same issue. Right now, it's a lot of enthusiasts that start to use the language. And this is the people that do care. This is the people that learn the language, that are interested in the details, and that do use the safe mode most of the time, and only the unsafe mode only when it's truly necessary. When I give this into the hands of somebody who does not really care, how often is the unsafe mode used? And I believe this is going to be a problem for Rust as well, because as soon as you have somebody who,
I have seen that as a freelancer, basically. We had now not used anymore C++ program for a certain mobile OS where you wrote apps with that. And I kind of refused to work really with that, but I had some freelancers which did apps with that, and I met one of them, and he was like, "Yeah, no, I'm not using the I just knew this stuff, and then that's running in my app, and that's fine. And then the app crashes at some point, and then this is all free." And I've also seen a client of mine being surprised that when you do not use new to allocate the init function or something like they allocated an object which went to the cache register and allocated basically the connection to this register where you pay with a credit card. And so the terminal would stop working after a while because they had now basically allocated all connections which that thing allowed. And I was like doing the bold move. I don't know really what they're doing there, and I don't know the code because this is like this terminal, and who knows what that C library does. But why not because they never called free on it either, so that's like as they should have or something. I don't know. But I was like, why don't we put that in a smart pointer and see what happens if we really need to have this allocation the whole time? And then as the next point is like, I think which is an issue in our industry is like testing. We don't have enough tests, and that's why we are not able to move forward as much as we can. And it's also a safety issue. But like a few weeks later, I hear from them like actually like a few of the changes we made, and a lot of those addressed like safety, and not safety but memory leaks. Their software suddenly was running way more stable, and that their cashiers didn't have to reboot their machines that often anymore. That they basically could now run through all day. And I guess it also is like something which shows up in your revenue, and you don't have to have people waiting because your cashier has to reboot the machine, because that was basically their fix to everything. So if the program is like hanging or doing something which is not supposed to, just reboot the machine and it starts clear up again. Because it's like one of the things which I explained at the start is like the end product user does not know anything about software. They're just doing their thing in the UI, and so don't show them anything technical. Don't show any error messages to them, because that's going to confuse them. And that was interesting.
But now everybody who hears that, probably everybody who listens to this interview will say, "Whoa, how could I not use smart pointers before? Why do they not free their stuff?"
That was 10 years ago. That was 10 years ago, right?
Oh, 10 years ago. Okay. Slightly different time, definitely. But I believe this is still the case in many contexts. That's one of the things that I do see as a trainer. It's not bright sunshine everywhere. No. In some places, definitely yes. But in many places, people are so far behind from an experience point of view, from a standard point of view, from knowing the language. I think it's an ongoing problem. Yeah.
In one of my job fairs, I had a guest from, I think they were even from Saudi Arabia or some part of Asia. And and they had worked the last 20 years with C++ Builder. It was a very old version because they had like an industry which used that, and that was C++ for them. And now they figured out that basically, that they've been living on that island and were using that technology, which is 20 years old, and now they changed to a new world and see that things like C++ 11 were new to them, and then the new standards on, and there's a lot of change for them, and they're like, oh, so and like a different user I met over the job fair said they do not know the standard versions, and they don't care about that either. They don't know C++ 11, 17, 20. They know by compiler version. So they use the Visual Studio, and what the Visual Studio version supports, that's what they use. And they're probably not even aware what the version like supports, because they mostly use the language they know. And I think I agree very much with you that there's a lot of developers which think that their knowledge of C++ is good enough, and maybe that's true for their job, and then that's just what is very economical for the company, to have people just write code and features.
Indeed, yeah. So in my daily work, so in my training classes, I've never experienced that. But that is probably because this would not be the people that hire me for training classes. Because if somebody hires me for a training class, there's at least one person that cares about code quality, about new C++ standards, about better code. And yeah, I'm pretty convinced that this is still part of this 10% bubble. Yeah, the rest, the 90%, we pretty much have no influence on.
Yeah, I find it right now interesting to see who's like buying online tickets for my conference right now, because it's like all over the world. I don't know, like the US is coming slowly, but it's mostly meaning C++ is very Europe centric, right? So mostly people from Europe right now, but it's also international. We have like one person buying it from Australia, and that's interesting.
It is. The time difference will make it tough.
Way more people with that than we had in the past. But I still agree that, of course, you can only reach the folks which make the effort to be reached, because there's so many people which have their everyday life and they're busy with that, and I very much also understand those people. And then there's the other folks which basically use it as a tool to, scientists writing their papers and writing code which goes over their files and does the analysis, and maybe they're using, you wrote the Blaze library, so that might be interesting to those people. Calculations.
Which brings me back to my talk. This is a little bit what I will address in the Silver Bullet talk. Because if somebody is going to make a change, it's not me, it's not you. I think it's the people that go to the conferences, that pick up the new stuff. They should show their colleagues too. I think this should be like a snowball system to some extent, a positive one in this case. So I think the excitement about C++, the excitement of the new things, how much better things could be, this is what people that go to the conference should bring to their teams, so that next year the other
Many
people, many do, absolutely. That perhaps we have to do a little more.
Over the years, I've noticed that more and more people are actually sitting in the talks and taking actively notes. And I know that a lot of them do that because, unfortunately, the trend now is to send like one person to the conference, and they they are remotely controlled to which talks they should go, and take their notes, and then so it's like great to know that we as a conference now are able to give you not only remote access, but also have the inclusion of the video access after the conference. So if you missed a talk because you got in an interesting conversation with a committee member or with someone else, then maybe you're not getting into the smaller side rooms, or you just missed the talk because you had an interesting conversation, which is totally fine. then you can still see the talk and share that.
Absolutely. And I think this should be stressed. So for those who are watching, from my point of view and from my experience, the most interesting track is not the A, B, or C track. It's the hallway track. So it's talking to the people at the conference. It's exchanging ideas. It's exchanging opinions. That is the most interesting part. And this is why I enjoy being at the conferences. The talks will be recorded in pretty good quality. They will be online. Okay, admittedly, sometimes if you are in a talk, you actually see that there's more going on. I could tell a couple of more stories, funny ones and some interesting ones from being in the talk. But still, the hallway track is unbeatable. That's why you are at the conference.
That's right. You're actually a staff member of my conference, and one of the jobs you have is to manage the registration and the badges, which we definitely have this year.
Hopefully, that was funny last year. Yeah.
So what do you do as a staff member? How do you experience the conference?
So I experience it a little bit different, but not entirely different. So I have the pleasure to organize the registration. So on the day before, but also at the first day of the conference. And of course, my goal is that people, as quickly as possible, get their badge, get a T-shirt. Okay, there is no Corona test anymore, but the stuff that people get during the registration. And that is a pleasant experience already. A positive impression of being at the conference, a friendly welcome. But then later, I pretty much just tried to smooth the conference by, for instance, helping the speakers, setting up the machines, dealing with the questions that people have, etc. Thanks to the fact that we now have a video team on site, things are a little simpler. It used to be a little more work for us, staff, but now still, I consider myself as a person that tries to help wherever possible. I see a lot of talks as well, so I do not really feel like I have a different kind of conference experience. It's great for me as well.
One thing that makes your life a lot easier, and I just had a conversation with the technical staff, and we remember that in the main room which we're using now, there used to be a projector which was pretty picky about laptop gets to present and who's not, and especially the new Apple things until 2019, which now is of course old hardware, but the new Apple ones were not working. And I think the explanation was always that the line was too long, that their signal was running too long, and that things would be not be processed then by the projector. And they exchanged that, and so it works now. And then also, like last year, the projector had to be exchanged because they had a faulty one. And I still think that it's like we got so lucky that Kevin did the keynote at the beginning because he handled it so well. It almost looked like staged.
No, but he did a marvelous job. I would not have. I would not have been able to continue like this. No.
So I actually got to go back to your trainings and ask a bit like, on what standards are those folks? What are the standards you are being requested to that year?
Fair question. So I rarely do training classes that address a particular standard. This is what many of the other trainers do, but I usually focus on either software design, best practices, or just writing good code. But the people that hire me mostly nowadays work on C++17. I believe this is because the automotive industry in Germany is now pretty much at C++17. Some are still at C++14, very few at C++11. And some have already moved to C++20 or even 23. And so I think it's like a bell curve with a peak a little beyond C++17. And it's moving slowly towards the newer standards, which is good, which is great. but unfortunately, for instance, there is a MISRA standard only for C+17. And many of the automotive people need some guidelines, need some specifications. And if this is done in C+17, then of course this is the limit. If we progress here, then of course we'll see many more people adopting the newer standards.
Yeah, that's actually outside of that. It's like I had last year was a different staff member. I think it was Andreas Reischuk.
Yep.
He mentioned to me that we are right now stuck with C++17 in the industry mostly because 20 has taken so long to be implemented.
Yep.
And then, of course, like the automotive industry is a whole different topic because they are on AutoSAR and MISRA, and what those standards allow is what you use. And those projects run for years. And then we have to see what happens then. I think one problem we have with the conference is that we move on too fast, and that we talk about reflection now, and reflection will be implemented in compilers in, let's say, 3 years, and then you submit your reflection talk to the conference saying, hey, I tried the reflection, it was great, and I would like to speak about it. And then the reviewers say, well, reflection, that was 3 years ago. Nobody cares about reflection anymore because we, the crowd that has been learning C++ on our own, on our free time, knows about that. But the big part of the herd is just moving to it, and it would be interesting to folks to hear about it. And so it's why I really like your contributions. And also we have our own talk from Olivia about applied modern C++, which I think is very interesting. And I also see it. I have still to go into the survey and kind of extract the data a little bit more. But I, of course, see every year how this shifts. And I also see how in this year with the job fair has this form where you submit your CV and you give us a little bit of your knowledge, what you think is good, and you should, And these profiles are very interesting because I can aggregate them and then, show you X% of candidates know C++17, and C++20 is still very much behind on that. And it's probably that a lot of people don't want to put that for potential employer up because that's knowledge they don't want to be tested in an interview on. But it's just interesting to see and compare.
Interesting. I would have expected that many people state that they are totally up to date to be more interesting for employers. But I see your point. If then there are questions about C++20 or even 23 stuff that you're not prepared for, that would not be great. But if you also see this slow forward trend that more and more people use 20, but that we are currently at 17 mostly, then this kind of confirms my impression too. It's I believe there are many reasons.
Actually, let's bring me. I have the question in the survey. This is now not from the because I wanted to compare that to the overall community. And from the survey, I last year put in the same multiple choice question, which is a lot. This is a lot of different skills. So it's basically the question is, need to scroll up that to see that. The question is, what are your C++ skills, right? And I know there's many missing, but we cannot just have them all.
An important 663 votes, which is not just a few, it's quite a number.
Yeah, we slowly get to relevance here. We see that Conan is a bit more than VC package. And I think in a more professional environment, Conan can be better, but that seems to be a split audience. But still, you see how few people are actually saying that is their skill. And then you see C++11 is dominant and C++17 is dominant. So 80% is C++17, 660. It's not almost, it's almost 80%. And then it's not even 50% for C++20. And 23 and 26 is,
There is not even a 26 just yet, and still people have skills in C++26. This is interesting.
Yes. Because technically you already can apply it in some companies.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, the pre-releases, the trunk versions.
We just have 23. That's just,
Mhm.
that's actually current news that 23 is out. And I think by next year, I will start adding 23 to the other questions. Because actually, I don't want to change that as much. And I was like, and in the foresight, I said, let's add 23 and 26 to that question, so that we actually can see. Actually, let's bring up a different question. Because you were talking about patterns.
Mhm.
And I remember Jason Turner asking about patterns. And I was like, wait, why do I not have that question in the survey? And now here, this is an older question, so it has a bit more time. It's 800.
Yep.
And now, so this is basically saying which classic design patterns do you use? And this list is from Wikipedia. So if you want to know what those are, you can ask Klaus or Wikipedia. And this is multiple choice, I should say fairly. I have one with single choice just to tease people a little bit. But this is an interesting result here. And then you see that, factory and singleton are the most two popular patterns or well-known patterns.
Yeah. I suspect that most people do not really answer what is my favorite pattern, but which pattern do I know? Singleton is kind of infamous, I should say.
Multiple choice, so it's your favorite.
Yeah. What I'm surprised, for instance, about is that strategy is not mentioned by many. Although I'm absolutely convinced that every C++ programmer uses strategies on a daily basis. Yeah, this is the pattern. It's everywhere. People might just have not realized that there are so many strategies out there. So the standard library itself has hundreds of strategies, although not by base class, but mostly by template parameters.
And I mean, variant isn't like visitor should become more popular with variant.
Indeed. Yeah, I agree. So,
but again, those people probably don't know that they're applying visitor.
Mm-hmm. So again, one reason to join my training class in February. All right.
Right. That's a good plug for that. So is iterator actually using, is like the iterator we have in the language, the pattern? You must know about that.
Kind of is. The classic object-oriented iterator that they present is a little more what Java is doing. But still, what we have in C++ is exactly the idea of an iterator. It's an abstraction. Yeah, algorithms and containers don't have to know each other, but they can work together because of this intermediate iterator layer. And so it pretty much serves this design pattern, but it is implemented differently. You can now argue, is it better or worse? But that's a different story. It pretty much serves this idea of iterator. Yeah.
That's true.
All right. So well, I'm definitely looking forward to the conference. I think this will be a pretty exciting one, and probably the first one with 4 keynotes. Although one may be special, but still, I believe this is a pretty special occasion. So if some people are watching this and have not signed up, do so. I believe this will be a great, really amazing event.
We have 4 keynotes this year, and this is special, and it's only this year. That's like, and I've just learned through this interview that we actually have 7 keynotes. So I probably will bring that into the news that we have, technically it's 7. So we will never have so many keynotes again.
Okay.
Herb is speaking on Friday evening. I announced the quiz on the conference just this week. So Diego will be on Thursday back, and we'll be running again on our traditional Thursday to Saturday part, and tickets for on-site and online are still available.
All right. Very much looking forward to that.
I think with that, we pretty much talked about everything on a Friday. So I wish you a happy weekend, and I'm looking forward to see you in less than 2 weeks in Berlin.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.